Welcome to the True False podcast, presented by KBIA. I'm Sebastián Martínez Valdivia, and on today's episode, we're previewing this year's films with our True False programming team. Jeanelle Augustin, Boeckmann and Amir George. This year's lineup includes 38 films, 26 shorts, and several repertory programs, and we just do not have enough time to preview every single one, but we will do our best. First off, Jeanelle, Chris, Amir, welcome to the True False podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Let's start with the feature films. What are some of the films that you're most excited for personally?
I was going to actually start with the longest film that I believe that we're exhibiting at the festival. If we're calling them films, we actually have a television series. It's amazing too that we're playing. But the longest feature-length film that we're screening is a movie called I Walk on Water, which is directed by Khalik Allah, a two-time True False alum, who actually just today dropped the 7-minute long trailer for this movie, which everyone can take a look at. But if people, I'm guessing a number of listeners are already familiar with Khalik Allah. He made Field N-Word and Black Mother, which both premiered at the festival. But his background is in street portraiture. So he spent years basically at the corner of 125th and Lexington in Harlem, taking portraits of homeless people who live at that intersection. So in this film, he's actually kind of going back, and what's special about this movie is that it's a film that really kind of reveals much more about his process. In Khalik is reconnecting with this man named Frenchie, who is sort of his muse from that portraiture project that he's been doing at 125th and Lexington, and he's bringing Frenchie back into his home. He is just getting closer and closer to him in ways that make some of the people around him kind of express concern about whether he's kind of crossing lines or not. So it's a movie that's definitely exploring kind of the ethics of his own work and opening it up for conversation, but also revealing just more about Khalik as a person. I think it also feels like in some ways it speaks to the diary film tradition. And feels like kind of a reinvention of that. So, that's like a film that will be world premiering at the festival, and we're really excited that Khalik will be traveling here to present it.
That's very exciting. His films are always very visually rich, and his street portraiture kind of uses depth of field really interestingly. So there's one specific thing that's in focus and drifting in and out of focus, kind of.
Right.
Cool. Jeanelle.
I think the film that I'm most excited about is called A Machine to Live In. It is a really wild film about architecture and aliens and cults. I love it. It's insane. And what I love about it the most is that it's looking at the built environment and how architecture can sort of symbolize like our dreams and hopes for the future, and what does that look like when those dreams aren't realized. But with this also kind of like doomsday Tron aesthetic that I can't recommend enough. It's so good.
That sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
Amir?
One of the many movies that I'm excited about is Creststone. Creststone is this very weird, magical film about these group of guys who are like taking refuge in this part of Colorado. And it's about like the end of the world. It's about chaos and having fun, and also like eating bologna sandwiches. And I think it's a film that a lot of people will be like surprised by, and also really like appreciate.
Seems like you're covering a lot of bases with that, the end of the world and bologna sandwiches.
Totally. The beginning of the end.
And then every festival, there's some films that kind of seem to attract a lot of, viewers that maybe aren't necessarily your typical creative nonfiction film goers. Are there any films that you could foresee potentially being kind of crowd pleasers or more popular items?
Mm-hmm. I think one that comes to mind immediately is called Mucho Mucho Amor. It's about this larger-than-life Puerto Rican astrologer who for, I think, over 15 years, every day was sort of reading horoscopes and had millions of people tune in. And then, he has these like wonderful capes and costumes, and he's a dancer. And I think he was like trained in ballet and flamenco. And basically the film follows him from childhood to the point where he's like at the height of stardom, and then tries to figure out why he disappeared from public view. So that's a great, really fun film.
Is that Walter Mercado?
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
He's kind of a cult figure in like the whole Latinx U.S. community. everyone's TS listened to his horoscopes for a long
Exactly.
time. But yeah, that sounds really interesting. Is there anything else that y'all think?
I want to say like City So Real is a new project by like legendary filmmaker like Steve James. He's been in True False like a few times. I'm really happy to also have him back. Like City So Real is pretty much like a 4-part series, all set in the realest city in the world, Chicago. But
A little bit of personal bias
Yeah,
creeping
it
in.
gives a little bit insight to like the mayoral like race that just happened there, like really like historic race between like several candidates, but came down to like 2 women. That was the first time that happened in Chicago political history. But also it gives you like good insight to the city that I think a lot of people aren't aware of or like, haven't seen before.
Steve James, of course, of Hoop Dreams, and then also more
The
recently,
Interrupters. Yeah.
America to Me,
America
his
to Me,
docu-series, which is really excellent. That's exciting. Chris, do you have anything?
Yeah, I think there's actually a first-time film that just won the Best Emerging Director prize at Sundance, and it's made by this guy named Arthur Jones, who actually grew up down the road in Jefferson City, Missouri. And this film, Feels Good Man is the name, is looking at an illustrator named Matt Fury, who created this comic book strip called Boys Club. And in that book club, there's about a group of friends, and one of the characters in it is a little frog who a lot of people might be familiar with Pepe the Frog. And if you don't know the story of this, I guess the shortest version of it is to say is that this is a movie about an illustrator who creates this character, and suddenly the internet grabs a hold of it and turns it into something wildly different. And he finds himself in kind of this battle of attempting to like rescue him. So yeah, it has unbelievable like animation actually going throughout. It's some of the best use of animation I've seen in a documentary to just kind of talk through the kind of what happens to his image over time. So we're excited to have Arthur finally make his way back to mid-Missouri.
Yeah, local connection. That's interesting. Yeah. That's obviously a character to anyone who lives online will be immediately recognizable. But yeah, that sounds really neat. Are there any other films that y'all want to talk about?
Yeah, like Mothni, Towards the Ocean, Towards the Shore, by Skaya Pinka, one of my favorite artists, period. His new film is like debut feature film. Basically is around the Chinook, the origin of a like death myth. But it's a very beautiful film, like very majestic. It follows like 2 characters, like Jordan and Sweetwater, throughout this like miraculous landscape as we learn more about the myth of the town, their lives, and yeah, it's a real like meditative film. I suggest like whatever you do to chill, do it before the movie and then go see the movie.
That's very safe legally from a legal standpoint. That's good.
So one thing that a project that the festival runs alongside the Catapult Film Fund every single summer is called the Rough Cut Retreat. And this is where 5 different filmmakers who are still in the middle of kind of finishing their films gather over the course of a week to watch one another's movies and give notes. I mentioned a film already, Feels Good Man, that participated in this past year's, but there's a second film actually that we're exhibiting at the festival this year that participated in the Rough Cut Retreat, and it's actually world premiering at the festival. It's called Mayor, and this is a film following the mayor of Ramallah, Palestine, over the course of the holiday season. The movie has really terrific access to him as he's kind of just walking around the streets, addressing kind of the complaints and the different problems that his constituents have, but also it happens to kind of coincide, the production tends to coincide with a few kind of major developments in Israel and Palestinian relations. So it's just a sort of movie where it's so up close with him the entire time and it never leaves his side, so that you kind of just like feel these news stories that you're already familiar with in this kind of this new way. It's kind of like perspective altering in that kind of way. So
that might be an interesting double feature with the Steve James mayoral campaign.
Yes, absolutely.
Documentary.
The film that I would also highlight is called Down a Dark Stairwell by Ursula Yang. It is about the police-involved shooting of Akai Gurley in the Pink Houses of East New York. And so what I think is really strong about this film is it doesn't sort of pit the Chinese American and the African American community against one another. It's really looking at how they both are trying to find justice and protection under the law in a way that's ultimately revealing how faulty our justice system really is and how it doesn't serve communities of color at large. It's really smart. And what's really eye-opening for me as a viewer is I lived in New York during that time, and I only knew the story from my own experience as a Black person. And what was really cool was that she, the filmmaker Ursula, really looks at not just the Chinese American community as a monolith, but sort of like the progressive activists who are Chinese American, as well as maybe more conservative Chinese American communities, and how they were kind of rallying amongst each other to fight to get sort of like recognized and embraced by the NYPD, because the NYPD tried to throw Peter Liang under the bus. It's a really complicated film. It's in a bunch of different languages. It's really cool.
That sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
In an election year, often ethnic groups get kind of grouped into one big monolith when
Totally.
revealing that complexity, I think, is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And we mentioned Khalik Allah earlier, but we also have some other returning filmmakers. Kirsten Johnson's bringing her new film.
I love this film. It's a Black comedy, which basically tries to explore. I actually think it's a Black comedy, but really sensitive too. It tries to control death because that's like one of the stages of grief is denial and disbelief. And so the filmmaker basically tries to kill her own father rather than have to suffer the waiting of when is it going to happen. One thing that I noticed in watching this film is that in her earlier film, Camera Person, we watch her mother go through the stages of dementia and eventually pass away. And in this film, sort of that thread is being extracted and expanded upon. So basically, her father, who is, I think, also a psychologist, has dementia as well. And so they kind of collaborate in this beautiful and also shocking series of fake accidents and stunts where there's like a fake funeral for him and he falls down a flight of stairs and an air conditioner falls on his head, and it's all of these ways of using fiction and action to sort of get at something deeper and maybe more real about the human connection and basically like how can we use cinema not to sort of like keep someone alive forever, but maybe keep something about their essence or that relationship alive.
It's probably like the funniest movie we have in the lineup.
Yeah,
That's
think
good.
that's right.
I'm excited to laugh and probably also cry a
You will
lot.
cry.
Are there any other films that we want to touch on?
Just from our alumni, actually, I wanted to highlight Amanda McBain and Jesse Moss, who were here years ago with a film called The Overnighters, which I know is a huge favorite of many True False attendees, are back with this film called Boys State, which is following the Texas Boys State tradition, which, if you don't know, is this thing that happens around the country. Actually, there are various Boys States. There's a Missouri Boys State as well. But basically, every kind of part of the state has representatives who are chosen, like the best and brightest kind of teenage boys, and they all convene in Austin, Texas, around the state capitol and participate in this mock election in which they're all attempting to kind of gain the title of governor. And for me, this is kind of like a miracle of observational filmmaking. It's one of those movies where it feels like the camera is like somehow in the right place at every single moment. It feels like it's the same camera operator, but it's clear that they needed at least 6 or 7 people doing this to pull it off the way that they do. But yeah, I think it's, if you're wanting a film that kind of like that you find kind of like really gripping, this is a movie that kind of like generates those same sort of emotions maybe that you feel when you are watching a football game or American Idol or what have you, but also has a lot of really great ideas running through it about like the future of our democracy. So that's, I think, a film that people are going to be talking about a lot. It won the Grand Jury Prize at Sundance last week. So.
All right. Well, we were going to take a quick break. Afterwards, we'll be speaking about some of the shorts programs that we have coming up this year, one of my favorite parts of the festival every year. But we'll be right back after this. Welcome back to the True False podcast presented by KBIA. Let's get back to our preview of this year's festival program by talking about shorts. One thing I think True False is particularly good at is curating the shorts programs, which in other festivals can sometimes be kind of long, meandering things, but in True False they always feel very focused and intentional. And they're also organized a little differently from programs at other festivals. Can you talk a little bit about how the shorts programs work?
In addition to trying to create these very tight and cohesive programs that have a wide variety in them, we also have responded to this kind of problem that we notice at other film festivals where they screen a block of shorts, have 20 minutes afterwards, and 5 filmmakers standing on stage, and there's no productive conversation that comes from that situation. So instead what we do is we have one kind of very big screening, which will be happening actually in Gannett this year. And then afterwards, there is a reception, which is a more extended period of time where everyone gathers and you can have a one-on-one conversation with the shorts directors. And so every single shorts program is actually named after the drink that will be served at that reception.
For me, I would say the program is Rouge. It consists of a very amazing set of short films that we're all excited about. Coming from the Sea, the Stars, and the Landscape, of one called Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. There's also a secret screening of a short that I'm not going to say too much about. And Lost 3 Make One Found is another film that we're really excited to have in the lineup as well.
The whole secret screening trend that we've been doing has shifted to a completely different part of the lineup for some reason. But so I think another program that we're really excited about, and that is called Boeck. And this is a program that has a lot of very political shorts throughout it, and films that maybe are a little bit more on the experimental side as well. I think the film that is in this lineup that I have not been able to get out of my head since we all watched it together is this movie called Good Ended Happily. The director, Basir Mahmood, hires this crew, this Lollywood crew, to recreate the night that Osama bin Laden was murdered. And so they have complete creative control over what that looks like, and it's not really lining up with reality exactly, but there's this camera that's almost just kind of floating like a ghost through the set. And it's a really haunting movie, and we're really happy that Basir's actually going to be traveling all the way here to represent the film and talk about it.
And I can go over the short section, Blanc. It's a really beautiful collection of ceremonies, secret societies, religious kind of traditions, and looking at sort of the gaps in tradition and the way that maybe stories are told. So the first short in that series is Jessa, which looks at a Korean tradition of making a meal for ancestors. But the filmmaker is sort of questioning about who that meal is really for, and sort of poking fun at it, and also looking at the ways patriarchy operates in that meal, where basically her mother is sort of saying you don't have to do this for me when I die. I think this is stupid. And so it's really playful and also witty. And the film uses a stop motion animation. That's really beautiful. And then we also have in that program Aurora. So that film is really striking. It is totally silent, and it has 3 Cuban women staring directly into the camera. It's shot in black and white and has these really stunning compositions, and it all takes place in a dilapidated movie theater. And then we also have The Spirit Keepers, which takes place in Taiwan, and it sort of goes back to this traditional landscape and looks at these different religions clashing between traditional indigenous religious practices and also Catholicism, and looking at colonialism all along this really beautiful ocean landscape.
Awesome. And then moving away from shorts, we also have our True Vision awardees this year, our True False alums who've had several films at the festival and are bringing a new film this year as well. The Ross brothers. Can you talk a little bit about that program?
Yeah, my relationship with this duo, I think back to when I was actually in college. So way back in what that was 2010, 2009, most films submitted to us were submitted on DVDs. Most of the time they would just come in CD cases, and you would there was a whole process where you would create a label for the DVD spine. And anyway, I just remember that their first film, 45365, they actually sent it in this really nice case. And I remember passing by it every day and being like, that's a really cool title and case. And I never like picked it off of the shelf and actually watched it. So it's like the one that got away kind of for me. So it's kind of meaningful that now like 10, more than 10 years later, around 10 years later, actually, exactly, we're giving them this prize. They've made a lot of strides in their career since then and have, but just to back up and explain who they are, these are two brothers, from the town of Sydney, Ohio. And they were kind of working in these kind of like commercial tech jobs in the film industry, and they figured out that they were like just really sick of it. And so they abandoned those jobs, moved back to that hometown of Sydney, Ohio, and constructed this really kind of beautiful impressionistic portrait of day-to-day life in that city. And that film actually ended up going and winning South by Southwest. But every single film that they have made since then is always very kind of closely connected to the place that they live in. And so that includes New Orleans, which was the setting of their follow-up film, Chapatulas, and then also Eagle Pass, Texas, the setting of their film right after that, called Western. There's something, all of their movies come off as they're kind of as if they're these just like delightful, straightforward, observational films where they just always seem to be in the right place at the right time. But they're actually always way more constructed than they first appear, and that's definitely the case for their newest film, which is called Bloody Nose, Empty Pockets. I don't know if either of you want to talk about that movie.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Basically, the setup is that it's the last night in a bar in New Orleans, and you have sort of this collection of, we like to say barflies, but there are other words to describe that. But we have a list of sort of people who literally live at the bar. We have people who are veterans, young people coming in for a drink, and they're all gathering to celebrate and sort of have this like last round and hurrah. And they get really drunk, and basically it's sort of this night of dancing, crying, sort of connecting with one another and thinking about like what that bar means to them and what that space affords them, whether that's like their only moment of human connection all day or all week for the people who really live in isolation, or if it's sort of a community of bartenders. And we have also moments where the employees bring their families in, and because maybe they don't have access to childcare. And it's sort of what I really like about this film is it's really interested in community, and it looks at relationships that might seem weak, but actually as you spend more time with people, you can get to know them sort of beyond sort of just like the shallow layers, and also how alcohol helps in sort of opening people up a little bit. So it's really fun.
Their films are always kind of like dreamy and disconcerting, but also weirdly heartening a lot of the time. So I'm really excited to check this one out. Mm-hmm. And then we also have our Neither Nor series every year. Can you talk a little bit about what this year's is?
Yeah, so this is our repertory sidebar where we just want to spotlight artists who kind of did some groundbreaking work that really makes the contemporary work that we're exhibiting even possible. This year's has been one that we've been kind of dreaming about for years because, every so often you learn about someone who grew up near you, who's like someone like who's done amazing work. You read about them maybe, or you see them out. And so, we've had this like running list of kind of artists from Missouri that have actually worked in nonfiction spaces. And this year we are kind of, doing, I think in part because there's all this planning going on right now about the bicentennial, the state and what have you. I think our celebration, it is a celebration of the artist, but I think it's important to note that every artist that we could identify who has done groundbreaking work in this area from Missouri left the state, usually around age 19 or 20. So hopefully that's like going to change, and we're going to have some, Columbia-based artists to feature in a retrospective years down the line. But this year we actually have like a really interesting cross-section of artists represented in the program. It kicks off on actually Wednesday night, the day before the festival officially begins. We'll be hosting this artist named Lisa Steele. She's like a video art pioneer. So she's kind of originally was very famous for this piece she did called Birthday Suit with Scars and Defects, in which over the course of around 8 or 9 minutes she stands naked in front of the camera and talks through every single scar she has. It's kind of a very influential piece of feminist video art. But the films that we're going to be focusing on when we bring her to town for that Wednesday night screening, which will be free and at Ragtag, are going to be films that she made around the time that she was working at this shelter for women and children. And these are these films that she made where she was working at that shelter and talking to various people who are going through it. And she would create these kind of composite characters out of them and do these sort of direct addresses to the camera. So she's herself performing. And the film the longest piece that she ever made as a part of that project is this film called The Gloria Tapes, which is inspired by soap operas and follows this woman named Gloria as she basically attempts to work her way through the welfare system. And so a lot of it is actually about the kind of language that people use in those spaces and her trying to figure out how to gain power through language. And yeah, that's one film. And then another one, I think the one that's actually, really made this series, made us decide to go this route was when we learned about a filmmaker named Mike Henderson, who's actually from very close by Marshall, Missouri, of all places. He actually works in a variety of mediums, and all of his kind of work speaks to one another, but he's both a blues musician, he's a painter, and he's an experimental filmmaker. And I think he was actually mostly kind of, if you would look him up on the internet up until a few years back, would see more about his paintings and then maybe his music. It wasn't until a few years back that they started kind of restoring some of his works, and there was a real revelation for a lot of people in the film community. So he makes short films that are, there are a variety of different kind of things that he's done. Some of them are these 2 to 3 minute long abstractions where you have no clue really exactly what you're looking at, and slowly the film pulls out and you realize that you're just in his kitchen. So those are really fun to look at. And then other times he's dealing with incidences throughout history. There's one in which he's reliving the Passion play. Then that one probably will not play well in a church if we were to do it. There's another instances where he's in his kitchen and he is actually reenacting the slave trade over the course of a few minutes. So that one will be exhibited. It's called Down Here. But we're really excited about that program as well. We'll be screening 60 millimeter prints from the Academy of Film Archive. So let's at that. And there are two other artists, Tom Palazzolo, and also we'll be screening a 60 millimeter print with of Still Here, a film from 2000, directed by Christopher Harris, who will be traveling down from Iowa. So anyway, all those screenings are free and open to the public.
Neither nor often not as hyped as maybe other films coming off of other festivals, but often, in my experience, some of the most rewarding experiences, and also films that you just can't find in a lot of places a lot of the time. So definitely encourage people to check that out. And then every year the festival has some kind of organizing theme. Can you talk a little bit about what this year's theme is?
The theme for this year's festival is foresight, which is sort of a clever turn on ideas of vision, the future, the past. We've got a new programming team. We have lots of new members on our whole team at large at True False, as well as just thinking about okay, new decade, what's it going to look like? Whose voices do we really want to hear? While also kind of thinking about divination and ways of telling the future. So we have tarot cards that we're making. We have on our sort of fest poster, you can see, I forget the name of it now. Maybe you guys know. It's what's that golden ratio with the circle? I noticed that was behind it.
The Fibonacci sequence.
Thank you. And so there's all these different ways of looking at patterns in nature and sort of cyclical movements in time.
We're around 3 weeks out from the fest. What does life look like for y'all in those 3 weeks? Maybe we can just go straight down the line with Jeanelle.
Chilling. I insist on yoga, 8 hours of sleep. I think that especially when we're really busy, it's super important to have ritual and things to keep you sane. Square meals, face masks.
Self-care.
Yeah.
I'm feeling really inspired by Jeanelle's response. I've never gone that route, and it would probably be better for all of us if that was the thing that we did. So normally, we'll all be working next week on the actual print program. So all of the long descriptions in the schedule, which will be going out in a few days here, we're going to be looking at them even more and doing more copy editing, and they're just a wide variety of strange requests that will come into our inboxes and filmmakers who want things to happen, and we'll just be fielding them and with a smile on our face.
We're also We have a new program, which I don't think we've mentioned yet, which is taking place during the festival. It's called PRISM. It's a 2-day incubator for artists of color. And so we are going to be finalizing the schedule. The list of artists should be on our website shortly, but it's a really exciting program for artists with works in development. And our hope is that in the future they will be able to screen here at True False when they're ready for the world. But basically, we're putting together this list of speakers and installations, and there will be touch points that are publicly available during the festival, too.
Amir, what do your next couple of weeks look like?
Oh man, I like long moments of like meditation sometimes. So I'll probably try to get like a couple of those in. Other than that, just dotting the I's and crossing the T's for the whole like program coming up, and just really excited to have everyone here and to share these films with everybody.
That's it for this week's episode of the True False podcast. Thanks so much to our guests, Jeanelle Augustin, Chris Boeckmann, and Amir George. We have a lot of great conversations coming up for you, so be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. You can also find past episodes on our website at kbia.org. You can find the fest at truefalse.org, where you can check out the program now, and schedules go up on February 15th. And there's still time to get tickets and passes if you're interested. This episode was produced by Corey Davidson. I'm Sebastián Martínez Valdivia. Thanks so much for listening, and join us next week for more from the world of nonfiction film.